हमें भारतीय कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन चाहिए, हमें इंडिक कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन चाहिए, मगर इंडिजिनिटी क्या है? एंड व्हाट इज इंडिजिनस? Is it, do you want to really go back 5,000 years? Was everything 5,000 years back good? If you want fundamental changes, you'll have to understand and figure out what those fundamental changes are going to be. What is the basis of these changes? And you will have to have a discussion. You will have to generate work and articles and writings and thinking and reading. We are not a revolutionary people. And again, as Swamiji said, we are evolutionary people. We believe that there is a possibility of evolution. The question, therefore, which is the topic of discussion here, is catalyzing indigeneity, decolonization of India, constitutional law principles. It's a very hard topic, half of the words which I don't understand too much. But मेरा दो questions हैं, and something which you all have to discuss on this is, आप constitution जब कहते हो, तो what do you understand by the term constitution? Do you understand it by जो text of the constitution, कभी भी आप कोई publication house में जाओ and they give you that constitutional text, do you understand that as to be part of the constitution only? Do you think that that constitution, and there may be other parts of documents, other parts of unwritten understandings of how India is governed, based on which India runs, do you consider that part of the constitution? Constitution, to my understanding, is not only what is written in the constitution, what is written in that book which you call constitution. There are a lot of extremely important understandings which go, I'll give you an illustration, an example. The scheduled caste, and who shall be the beneficiary of a scheduled caste is not put in the constitution itself. It comes as a part of a government order. But I would think that it's very difficult to shift that. That almost is a part of the constitution. And similarly for a large number of issues. There are lots of things which we take for granted. Like what is public morality? Supreme Court has tried to shift it by saying it's constitutional morality. But the very fact that you had a backlash also shows that there is something called public morality which, for the want of a way, large parts of India hold on to. So everything is neither written in that book, which you say as the constitution, neither can it be written. And here I will just tell you there are two approaches to the constitution. And I'm going to say this because I'll take you down a little bit more further than what I have to say. There are two ways to look at the constitution. Ek hai what the Romans did in their whole concept of jus civile, is that you write down everything what is there. What is against it is against the constitution, is not in the constitution. What is there is in it, it's in the constitution. That's one. Zyadatar Europe mein, this is the theory of constitutional making. That is the European theory. The British look at constitutional law very differently. I don't know how many of you know this. Britain में unwritten लोग कहते हैं unwritten constitution. तो constitution है ये, नहीं है. The British believe that there are constitutional documents. So there are some constitutional documents today. Those documents may not be the same documents day after. There are some things which I may take in today's generation, today's age, in today's context, are what is the fundamental documents to run the country. Tomorrow those documents may not be that relevant. I'll give you an illustration. What we understand as fundamental rights is what we think is fundamental to running a constitution. Britain till 2000, I think, did not have a fundamental rights chapter. Did not have fundamental rights in constitutional law. It achieved that by a mixture of using writs and tracing some sort of non-discrimination from different laws which it had passed. So what is the constitution, and is the constitution only that thing which is written in the book? First we have to think about that. Next is a bigger question, and this is something which you will have to face continuously. What is indigeneity? आप लोग, this huge discussion that the constitution is foreign, we need an indigenous constitution, we need a Bharatiya constitution. Constitution is based on the Government of India Act, which is 1935, brought in by the British. So we need an indigenous constitution. हमें भारतीय constitution चाहिए, हमें Indic constitution चाहिए. मगर indigeneity क्या है? And what is indigenous? Is it, do you want to really go back 5,000 years? Was everything 5,000 years back good? And मैं serious बात कर रहा हूँ. Okay, because I think I'm engaging with you on a serious level. ये स्वामी विवेकानंद जी, उनसे बड़ा नेशनलिस्ट तो मैं किसी को मानता नहीं हूँ. As in, great nationalist. स्वामी विवेकानंद जी भी वही कहते हैं कि not everything in your past is good. Never be under that impression. There were things which are bad which need to be discarded. He says that. I'm not saying it. So you will have to realize that there were things which are great about our civilizational identity. And we are all very proud of it. And we should be. We should use them as inspiration to way we run our country, way we run our state. But not everything was good. So you have to realize that what is indigeneity. The second is, can you have this seriously, this question? And this is what I was speaking to Kshitij with. Can you seriously think that you're going to run a state in the modern world as we exist today based on principles of 5,000 or even 500 or 700 or even 1,200 years old? Can you seriously run a state? Think about, when you have a constitution, fundamental rights, fundamental duties is only a small part of the constitution. Can you seriously think that you will run a state without a civil service? Can you seriously think that you will run a state without a standing army? Can you seriously think that you will run a state which will have interstate trade or inter-area trade throughout the same country and have an infrastructure which will be based on principles which are possibly 5,000 years old? You can be inspired by them, and you should be inspired by them. But you cannot have, and that is a fundamental mistake which we make, and there is a very famous English line on that. So you cannot go back home. आप घर लौट जा नहीं सकते. You have left. और एक बहुत मशहूर लाइन है, I don't know, Kshitij sir may know, which says that the past is a different country. They do things differently there. I am not saying that you will not be inspired by the civilizational background. And Swamiji was very clear that you have to be inspired by the background, your civilizational understandings of the world in case you want to create a new India. और ज़रूरत है. मगर you also have to understand what is this when you are talking about New India, what do you mean? Two, and something which is very important. You are now talking about creating a state and a modern state which will take care of all its citizens in this country, which will benefit all its citizens in this country. Naturally, you want to become India, or Bharat wants to, you will become Vishwaguru. If you want to become Vishwaguru, if you want to create a new India, as Swamiji said, this new India will have to be forward-looking, will have to necessarily face the challenges of the future. And I will remind you, when Kautilya wrote his Arthashastra, he did not think about what is happening in the past. He took inspiration from the past. And he refers that a number of times in his book. But he said, I am framing the governance structure of the future. So if you have to have a model, you will have to prepare for the next 5,000 years, next 500 years. So this indigeneity which you speak about will have to take into concerns of every citizen, and for the better word to be the platform on which New India is built. There is a very serious, and I'm saying this seriously, and don't get me wrong, I don't decry them, I don't think they're any less, I give them all intellectual space as they should be given. There is a line of thinking, and I don't know how many of you read Hind Swaraj. Have you read Hind Swaraj? Mahatma Gandhi's Hind Swaraj? There is a line of thinking paralleling Hind Swaraj. Hind Swaraj is one of them, which says any Western civilizational input in India is bad and has to be rolled back. And Mahatma Gandhi writes in that book, I don't know how many of you read it, saying hospitals are bad, railways are bad, any machinery's use is bad. Because whatever minimal machinery is required has to be. He even thought that charkha was a machine. Someone pointed out to him that charkha was a machine. But he was of the view that everything was bad. Medicine was bad. But do you seriously think that is possible? I personally think, my take on it is, there was a discussion between Gandhians and the editors of Prabuddha Bharat. I don't know how many of you know Prabuddha Bharat was the journal which was published by the disciples of Swami Vivekananda from Advaita Ashram in Mayavati. So there was this discussion, and the editors of this discussion was in relation to technology. And I think Swamiji was very correct in his perception where he said that you have to create an India which is sarvavyapi, which concerns everyone, but more importantly, be based and take advantage of technology and materialism of the present so as to improve the lot of your people. You know that famous statement of Swamiji, which is, you cannot give spirituality on an empty stomach. So you have to take care of the basics. And for that, that's what I'm saying. When you talk about an indigeneity, no doubt you have to be inspired, but you cannot go back home, and you should not even want to go back home. You cannot is one thing, but you should not even want to go back home. Now, in relation to the present constitution, again, I'm going to give you my nuanced view on it. I presently think that subsequent to bringing in force of this constitution as we see it today, we have indigenized it. We have indigenized it because it had to work in the reality of India. It could not have worked outside the reality of India. You had to indigenize it, you indigenized it. I'll give you an example. A right to life in the constitution, I'll give you 4 or 5 examples. Right to life in the Indian constitution is a very clear right to life. You shall not be deprived of your life to life except in accordance with law, provisions of law. You expanded, the Supreme Court expanded the right to life to mean life, to live a full life, not subject to animal existence, not like animal existence. Kuch bhi, so right to construction of roads in rural areas was right to life. Everything is right to clean water is right to life, right to environment is right to life. Now, where can you have this concept of right to life brought in as part of right to life itself? In any Western constitution, you cannot have it, it cannot even be conceptualized. You brought this in by using Indian jurisprudence, actually, because that is what you were thinking. According to you, life meant this, which was an Indic way of looking at what life is. You telescoped it because that is the provision you had in the constitution. Second, when you speak about something called right to judicial remedy, I don't know how many of you know that you have a fundamental right to approach the court. If you look at any Western jurisprudence, if you want justice, you only go to the court. There are ways and there are means how to go to the court. Here, the court simplified its jurisdiction to the extent that anyone could approach the court even by a letter petition. And you invented this entire concept of public interest litigation, and you sort of, took away the basis of jurisdiction and locus standi, who can approach the court. You completely changed it because you were acting actually the way Indians think about justice. Because the judges had that in mind. So because when you were faced, and there are so many other examples which I can give you. I can also give you another very, very interesting two examples. And I know that these are touchy and sensitive examples. But these are examples which you have to realize how the entire concept of reservation, and when you talk about equality, in every other country, equality is plain equality. Both of you are to be treated equal, and if you are not equal, then... In India, the Supreme Court in Indrasawny says caste is class. So if you look at the constitution, it says class. You cannot discriminate basis on class. In India, the Supreme Court in Indrasawny equates caste is class, or jati, for the want of a better, actually what it was talking about. So these are indigenizing the constitution. You realize that there was jati-based discrimination and that had to be corrected, so you brought that in. And so it is with conceptions of even religion as to what is essential practice. How do you go about essential practice? The greatest example is the word secularism in the constitution. And there are so many other, I won't even go into details, but the two end, and I'll give you two examples and end it. One is secularism in the constitution. Now, everywhere else in the world, secularism is separation of church and state. You look at it, that's the context and pretext of it. In India, you actually relied on an Upanishadic principle which Swami Vivekananda deeply spoke about a number of times. So called Sarvadharma Samabhav. If your definition of secularism is on Upanishadic principle, you've definitely indigenized it. When you talk about socialism, you introduce the entire concept of Sarvodaya. Supreme Court does it. It does not become socialism in the Marxist sense. You define it in terms of Sarvodaya. So in many ways, because you exist in India, the judiciary has attempted to indigenize your constitutional law. Not the text of the constitution, but things which go beyond the constitution. That's what I said. Your constitution is not only those which are written in the constitution, but those which go beyond it. There are other things beyond it. Fourth point. Anyone who thinks, let's say, even if our constitution starts from 1935, let's say our constitution starts from, it's a colonial constitution by the British in 1935. Do you think that 1935 Act came in a vacuum? Do you think we actually agitated for the structure of the constitution, or parts of the structure of the constitution, which came at 1935? There are roundtable conferences where all of our leaders went and participated. There was agitation in India, agitation after agitation, asking for allowing Indian judges into high courts, how to redistribute power, to decentralize power, to make the civil service more accountable. So a lot of these, to allow all India trade, these are things which we pushed. These are things which were products of or having elected franchise. Of being able to represent ourselves, for reservations of scheduled castes. These were things which were agitated, which were fought about. So in many ways, the Government of India Act is also not in a vacuum ki British aaj socha, kal dal diya, nahi. And when you form a constitution, it is not going to be one point of view. It has to take everybody's interests in point of view. If you're going to form a constitution tomorrow from scratch, again you'll have to take everybody's point of view. And a constitution will have to be a political compromise. If there is no political compromise, it will not work. So in many ways, even 1935 Act, which the British formulated, which is a Government of India published, passed by the British Parliament, but even then that is also to a great extent a subject of a number of us agitating for those changes. The first elections, the first representative, first constituencies, this goes back to 1919, the Government of India Act of 1919. And people who were not happy from 1919 agitated for 20 years till they got 1935 Act. So a lot of it, we also have to own our constitutional process and what has happened. So this entire process is, if you look at it, there were, and I'll end off this part by saying this, that if you look at the prime motives during the freedom struggle, and you look at what Lokmanya Tilak says, you look at what C.R. Das says, Deshbandhu C.R. Das says, you look at what Lala Lajpat Rai says, their vision was to create a modern India, a state which will create, you want to create a modern state which will take over, be a player in the world. And they realized that they did not want a revolution. And they clearly did not want that. There was a question which was put, and I always say this to Bal Gangadhar, the Lokmanya Tilak once, saying that what will happen, you want Purna Swaraj, you know that. Lokmanya Tilak was the famous person who said, give me Swaraj. Swaraj is my birthright and I will have it. He said, and so the question was put to him, what do you mean by Purna Swaraj? That is the question. So he says, what I mean by Purna Swaraj is I know that, I want the British to go away and these institutions will be manned by Indians. Because a people should govern themselves. Now, but does it mean that everything is perfect with the constitution? Is that what I'm saying? No. Am I saying that this constitution is perfectly in link with Indian civilizational values? Is that what I'm saying? No. Now, my thing is, what do we do to have a constitution? Where do I think the constitution needs to be more indigenized? The areas which we may want to look at. One is, I think there should be a more live panchayati system. Something which we were used to, and something which, for the want of a better word, so that people have representation. And I'll make a controversial statement here, which also may take a little sting out of the Westminster system that we have. Because now our system has become too Westminster system oriented. Though we worked it our way. I'm not saying that we haven't worked it our way, but we possibly need to work on those areas. We may also have to look at the question of a justice delivery system which reaches everybody. I think the biggest issue today are twofold. One is the representative nature of our democracy and whether the people whom we sort of regularly elect as our representatives, and whether we should have better people, whether they should actually reflect and continuously reflect the wishes of the people, how to go about doing that. And two is how to ensure that justice reaches everybody. Mahatma Gandhi was of the view that you cannot have this justice system and the benefit of the justice. He said that if you have this hierarchical justice system of district court, high court, Supreme Court, or then there was no Supreme Court, and high court, this system, you will never have justice which will reach everybody. It is not possible. And possibly he is right that if you have a justice system which was more local based, and my experience of Nagaland says that it's possible to have it, then maybe there can be a better justice system in this country. Two, I think an issue with the parliamentary democracy has, and Swami Vivekananda in 1898 had a criticism of that. Swami Vivekananda himself had a criticism where he said that the issue with parliamentary system is at some point of time there is capture of the parliamentary system by wealthier interests. In 1898. And he had a trenchant criticism of the British. He said, now you criticize us, but you look at your system. You look at your system, where does that leave the poor? So maybe we need to work on that and to find out a system which better represents us. I would say maybe if we look at, a system which is not based on winner wins all, but a system which works by consensus, something which the Buddhist Sanghas, the system of coming to a decision which the Buddhist Sanghas worked on those principles. It's not that these are alien to us, we worked these before. You cannot be a 5,000-year-old civilization and not worked on these things before, but you have to be able to bring it into the process of governance of this country. The other question, which is how do you make the civil service more representative? Because civil service runs this country. How do you make the civil service more answerable to the people? Can you inspire something from the Arthashastra? Can you have ways whereby you can make the civil services more answerable, bureaucrats more answerable to the people? But the solution will have to be worked out, and it has to be looked at in greater detail. Now, how do we go about doing this? And there are a large number of areas which we can work on. Now, how do we go about doing this? And this is something which I had a discussion with Kshitij sir in great detail. My view on this is that the best way to do it is to appoint good judges. And judges preferably, and I say this without any political content to it, from Bharat. And even if you appoint judges from India, then those judges will have to have Bharatiya sensibilities. Because you will now have to work the constitution, the principles of law that you have, which will take into account these aspirations. But the issue which you will face, and which we face, and another thing which we are discussing, is what are these principles? You will have to work that out. There needs to be research as to how can you incorporate Indian principles of social responsibility. A great Indian value which we use today as dharma, some of it uses fundamental duties, is the concept of social responsibility. That you don't exist alone as an individual, which is a very Western invention of social governance. I'm not saying it's good, bad, indifferent. I'm just saying that it's an invention. Is different from an Indian view of looking everything from a holistic perspective and a social perspective. Now, do you have enough material? Where are your academic work? Where is your alternative jurisprudence? If you want it to be incorporated as part of your governance structures, somebody will have to work on it. किसी को तो काम करना पड़ेगा. Everybody wants it to ऊपर से टपक के पड़ जाए. So merely by changing names or coming up with completely, at the end of the day, you will be left to changing names. Because you will not have an alternate vision in place, an alternate structure in place. Because there is no thought of an alternate structure. So you will be reduced if you change a constitution, or having a same constitution, possibly with 5 different Sanskrit words. And I'm saying the thing. If you want fundamental changes, you'll have to understand and figure out what those fundamental changes are going to be. What is the basis of these changes? And you will have to have a discussion. You will have to generate work and articles and writings and thinking and reading, which I see very little of. And I always tell people this, that I'm a person who's greatly inspired by Swami Vivekananda. But Swamiji put up great institutions. He created the entire Vedanta movement, took yoga to America, brought in Ramakrishna Mission. But he was a great intellectual also. And these are not mutually exclusive. But you have to work on that. And in the end, I will only say this and end this, that, you have had now your 70 years from effectively the Constitution, framing of the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson, the great American freedom fighter, one of the person who moved the fundamental rights in the Constitution. It was moved at his instance, and one of the great voices in the framing of the Constitution, said that a Constitution is only valid for 20 years. He said every 20 years you should need a new Constitution. I'm not saying, but we are Indians, and I'm saying this, and that is something which you should keep in mind. We are not a revolutionary people. And again, as Swamiji said, we are evolutionary people. We believe that there is a possibility of evolution. But any evolution, and this is where I will end it, any evolution that you speak about requires to look inside as well as study hard. If you don't do that, nothing is going to fundamentally change. So my answer to what your topic is, that we haven't even started the work which is important for us to make fundamental changes. I do not know of a single piece of legislation. I do not know of any great work which even scratches the surface. And I take an interest in it because I try to read as much as I can on it. And I would be happy if someone points me out to them. And unless you go about doing this as the first step, you will, as I said, end up by having the same thing with a different name. And that's not going to be worth it. Thank you.
Very good afternoon, sir. Yes. And this question is addressed to you because in your capacity as a former teacher, that you said about new jurisprudential principles. My question is, can we evolve our own indigenous jurisprudential principles if we constantly keep looking at the West as the gold standard?
No, we can't. I had a very interesting discussion with Kshitij sir just when we were discussing the cutting edge issue of biotechnology, which Western jurisprudence is extremely individualistic. IP, things of that sort. Kshitij sir was telling me that he had been working, there were papers where he tried to take an Indian perspective and looking at it beyond individualism. But the problem is, as I said, there's a disconnect between which is not there in the West because of its background, but where needs to be for us. Not only work like this, but it has to be connected to the judiciary. So it then gets taken out of the seminar rooms and gets incorporated into actual governance. So that is what this link is lacking. This is a wonderful area of doing that. But I think there needs to be more such work. And it needs to be on cutting edge subjects. And I think that's wonderful. And I requested him for his articles. Maybe we can put it together, maybe we can do something about it.
So I have
Yeah.
some. My question is twofold, probably. So before on addressing the fact whether we have to indigenize, my question is to take a step backwards and ask that what is the nature of Indian polity, for example? So are we a nation, as Acharya Aurobindo argued, which Ambedkar had very categorically rejected, that we are not a nation. The elements required to be a nation are completely absent in India. Or are we a nation state, as Machiavelli, Hobbes, and Ambedkar himself continued to argue after a point? So the kind of constitution we must have is really dependent on the polity we are.
Yeah, that's one of the fundamental questions. That's a fundamental question, and this goes to the source of the very idea of for the want of a better word, India, which still haunts us today. I'll tell you, and I think I've told you this, that Churchill wrote a book on India. And Churchill was one of the people who were most opposed to Indian independence. He was the last of the conservative MPs when fighting against the government, even after he lost his election, because after winning the war, World War II, he lost that election, and then the Labour government gave India independence. So Churchill was of the view कि ये दो देश तो हमने बनाया था, इस देश तो है नहीं. And Churchill was genuinely convinced, ये देश नहीं है. This country is, it's like, as he says, saying that India is one country is like to say Europe is one country. But the fact is, Europe now has started the process of working like one country. This is good, bad, indifferent. But if we have to take it as it is. We cannot be, strictly in Machiavellian terms, because we are not Europe. You can use a term as in, you'll anyway have to, what will happen is, in effect, is you will use a Western term to describe an Indian reality. So nation state you will use, but you will mean the reality of India. You take it that India exists with all its, the way we handle it is that unity in diversity, ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti, and then you work around that. And Swami Vivekananda, again, I'm a great, I'm continuously inspired. Swami Vivekananda, a very, very important thing to say. He continuously says that ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti is the key, this is the word which he uses, is the keystone of the arch in India. Keystone on the arch means if you take that out, the entire arch collapses. So he continuously says that the keystone of the arch in India is ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. So you create a state, a governance structure. I'm using nation state because I'm speaking to you in English. But you need to have a structure which keeps that in mind and keeps the fact of our historical and civilizational contiguity which runs from Afghanistan to Burma, maybe Tibet together, and where it is. You have to keep all that in mind and yet respect these differences. That's the unique, and you have to have a governance structure which takes that into account. Which in some ways, because of the world which we live in, as I said, because of the times of the modern world, will have to also be modern. So that is a process which we have to work out. And do I have a straight out answer? I don't.
I got a question to you. You said that, like the Article 21 extension in India, the jurisprudence which you made through through Justice Bhagwati and others, sir, wasn't that in Marbury versus Madison? Chief Justice Marshall also made the similar thing, and due process was extended
Yes,
to
agreed.
a great extent, and
Judicial
judiciary
separation.
So-
That's what I'm saying. Not everything. That's the first point which I made, sir. My first point was not every part of the Constitution which is written. I didn't want to go into a greater detail. Otherwise, I would have given that an example that even something like the American Constitution, which is as written as they come, also has portions which are unwritten.
Probably the Bill of Rights with all the clauses was not taken up wholly by the constitution makers of India. And secondly, we are talking about Arth Shastra and the primitive laws standards we had. weren't the constitution makers aware about these things?
Yes. If you look at the Constituent Assembly debates, and I had a long speech which I cut short, and I'll tell you this. The concept of a panchayati constitution, if I don't know how many, if you recall, there was the concept, and it was seriously discussed at the Constituent Assembly level, as to whether the constitution which we see today is going to be the constitution, or whether there can be an alternate constitution based on the panchayati model, which Mahatma and the Gandhians were then advocating. And Mahatma Gandhi ji had worked this in the Aundh state in Maharashtra. I don't know how many of you know this. It's called the Aundh experiment, where it worked for 3, 4, 5 years before it merged, Aundh state merged with India. And this draft was there before the Constituent Assembly. But you look at the debates were very clear. ये हमें देखना ही नहीं है. You know, you borrowed a lot from other places, which you thought were relevant. You took DPSPs from the Irish, fundamental rights from the American, the right to trade across all countries from Australia. You've taken it. But those were conscious decisions which you thought would work to create a modern state. But then you brought in a lot of, I can name a large parts of DPSPs, including the concept of trusteeship, which Mahatma Gandhi brought in, which were indigenous things, which the Supreme Court brings into Sarvodaya, socialism, because your sort of version of what you think is a fairer society arises from that. And again, this is not related to this topic. I think if there is a provision, or if there is a word which symbolizes different constitutions, the American Constitution, the keystone of America is liberty. Constitution of America is liberty. In France, it may be equality. In Britain, it may be parliamentary sovereignty or suzerainty. And for me, I would construe the Indian Constitution's keystone. If you read the preamble, it mentions justice a number of times. Now, why? And I would say it's justice. Now, the question is, again, that's a question which nobody is linked to. Why would you mention justice as that important to the Indian Constitution? Because according to me, justice is the closest word, constitutional word, which you can get for dharma. Because you are having this continuous problem of trying to frame a constitution in a foreign language to govern a people who don't speak that language. You can only come up with approximations. But the working out of it will be yours. And that is why I'm saying working out, and we need good judges to do that. We don't need judges who will heighten the conflict. Because there are conflicts. Because there is which again, Swamiji correctly and says a number of times, there is this push of infinite freedom which comes from the West. And there is this deep spiritual and old ancient thinking of India. So there is this continuous conflict. There will be this conflict. That's the dichotomy of the Indian state as of now. So whether you manage to, you require judges to be able to reconcile it without the least amount of trouble.
So my question is on one of the suggestions that you made, and even now, and I'm quoting it here, appoint good judges, incorporating Bharatiya sensibilities, Indic values and traditions. But see, so if one digs deep, how do we even make it possible? The practicality of it, how can even one guarantee that the authority or people concerned to appoint these judges or entrusted with this responsibility will imbibe these Indic values themselves? Thank you.
No, there are two things which I said. Number one, people who appoint judges will have to, is now judges appoint judges. So they'll have to, as I said, apply their mind, because I think the conflict which has just been touched upon now, the conflict between India and Bharat will become sharper. And you require judges who will reconcile these two issues. It requires a lot of work on Indic jurisprudence. It also requires work on choosing people who will be able to apply those principles into law. How do you go to do that? How do you find the best people to do that? That I think it's now the call is up to the judiciary to choose, because judges choose judges in this country. So, maybe discussion gets out, maybe this sort of thing will get to them, maybe they will be able to understand. Yeah.
Hello, sir. I am Mohit from Rajdhani College.
Hanji.
And sir, my question is that India और भारत, our country, जो हमारे औपनिवेशिक कानून है, क्या उससे सही मायनों में बाहर निकल के आ पा रही है, मुक्त हो पा रही है? अगर नहीं, तो क्या चैलेंजेस है वो जो कि फेस कर रही है, और ऑल्टरनेटिव क्या है अगर हम लोग इसको औपनिवेशिक से मुक्त करना है तो?
As in, what do you want to mean? What is the exact?
I want you to please explain that whether our India is facing difficulties while it decolonizing laws and or not. Moreover, I also want you to highlight some key points that what are the alternatives which it is focusing upon and which it can focus upon in the future.
See, this is the entire question on, this is the dilemma, which is the dilemma of your age also. आप लोगों के ज़माने में ये इशू है कि ये मॉडर्न वर्ल्ड, टेक्नोलॉजिकल वर्ल्ड बहुत दूर, बहुत फास्ट, बहुत डेवलपिंग चल रहा है, जहाँ पे आपको लॉज चाहिए, दोज हु विल बी एबल टू गवर्न दोज न्यू मॉडर्न चैलेंजेस. बायोटेक्नोलॉजी कहें, इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी कहें, बहुत सारे चीज़, इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी कहें, AI कहें, you'll have to have that. On the other hand, there is no homework done as what is an Indian perspective at all. और जो कर रहे हैं उनके साथ जो लागू करते हैं, and I'm not saying this will not happen by a statute. Statute जो भी कर लो, unless the judges who apply it keep this in mind, तब तक ये हो ही नहीं सकता. So ये disconnect between academia and judges has to be fulfilled, has to be filled up. Otherwise, आप जो कह रहे हो, this challenge is of course a challenge between our civilizational understandings and the technology ahead and liberalization ahead. And the easiest way, मैं आपको कह रहा हूँ, easiest way to do it, then a certain section starts saying, and I'm just not talking politically, I'm just saying that this is how it is. कि अरे उसकी तो कुछ है नहीं, तो मॉडल नहीं है, तो हम फ्रांस, इंग्लैंड, अमेरिका से कट एंड पेस्ट कर देते हैं, because that is the method, that is the only model which is available in front of us. And when you frame a law, let's say a biotechnology law, and you don't have this jurisprudence before you, then you'll say अरे लागू तो करना है, because something has to be governed, तो हमारे मॉडल कहाँ पे है? अच्छा, फ्रांस में एक मॉडल है, वो लागू कर दो. That's an issue. So you have to work on it, huh? You will have to work on it and not make too much money. Hanji.
So, a warm good afternoon, and I'm grateful and thankful to you as you have ignited our minds with knowledge. And we consider our constitution as a living constitution, and it is neither rigid and nor flexible. And according to our constitution, and it changes as per the situation of our society. So, it's subjected to amendment. So my question is, merely amendments are enough to indigenize our constitution, or we have to entirely change the structure of our constitution?
My take on that is exactly what I spoke about. My take on it is that you need good interpreters of the constitution. Practical people who want to apply it practically. You need good judges to apply that constitution. And anyone who's talking about root and branch change, I would, and there are a lot of people talking about root and branch change, I will only tell them this. Two things. Be careful of what you wish for, because it may come true. And you should not be in a position of that famous अंग्रेजी नर्सरी राइम होता था ना, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty Dumpty back together, back again. So if you have something, you better come out with a model. Hawa mein tod do, and then you don't have a model, may not be a good way to go about doing it. Then, as I said, and the third is what I said, otherwise then you'll end up just changing a few names and keeping the same structure intact. Because there is nothing fundamentally different you have in mind. So, first thing, it needs good academics to work on it. Second thing, it needs good judges to apply.